Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. I see more folks hopping on. Welcome. We're going to go ahead and get started with our event now. Hi, welcome. Hi, more folks. It looks like we have about 48 people and counting. So hello, my name is Lauren Jin. I work on the Google account as one of ISS Guggenheimer's teaching kitchen chefs in Boulder, Colorado. In March, we celebrated Women's History Month, and we were joined by some very inspiring women in the food industry who shared their stories and just incredibly powerful advice with us all. The response to these events was immense. It was overwhelmingly positive, and so many of you asked for more. So today, I am so excited to kick off a brand new ISS Guggenheimer Diversity Series. The goal of this series is to help us become an organization that leads with inclusion and grows in our diversity so that we can deepen our partnerships with our clients and our community. Today, I am so lucky to be joined by Amber Stott, who is a food activist and author. She created the nonprofit Food Literacy Center to inspire kids to do the impossible, eat their vegetables. Her efforts successfully launched a statewide resolution declaring every September as Food Literacy Awareness Month. She's also been praised by Jamie Oliver, Alice Waters, and Food Tank. Her organization was named Nonprofit of the Year. She hosts the podcast Raising Kale. She's got a TED Talk, and thanks to her action, California's 13th largest school district out of 1,000 built students a zero net energy cooking school based on her design. Please join me in blowing up that chat box on the right of your screen and giving Amber an extra warm ISS Guggenheimer welcome. Welcome, Amber. Oh, okay. I just unmuted your mic. Or wait, I think
I just did. Yeah, sorry. Perfect. Thank you for having me. Hello.
Welcome, Amber. I see. I hope you can see everyone in the chat box off to the right side saying hello and hi. We're just so incredibly happy that you're here with us today.
I am pleased to be here. Yeah.
So Amber, we're going to learn a little bit more about Food Literacy Center, but before, I kind of want to get to know you a little bit better. Can you tell me, beyond work, outside of work, tell us a little bit about yourself?
I do work a lot, but let's see. Outside of work, I have 3 cats. I hike a lot and far, and I would say everything else is kind of work related to food and farms and delicious things. Yeah.
And you're located in Sacramento, is that correct?
Yep, the farm to fork capital of America.
I love Sacramento. I went to school not too far out of Sacramento in Davis, so I love the area. Very hot in the summer, though.
Yeah. My cactus is real happy right now. I have a Luther Burbank spineless nopal, so I don't have to scrape off those spikes. I can just, so yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. And are you originally from the California area?
I grew up in rural Illinois, actually, in what I would consider a food desert. We had to go across the Mississippi River to Iowa to buy the majority of our groceries. So my parents had a big garden, and we were very lucky. We had lots of fresh stuff, but that was pretty unique and pretty rare because, like I said, we didn't have really grocery stores right in our own town. So being in Sacramento is like literally living in paradise. We have all the foods, and they're gorgeous. So it's a really fun place to be.
It's always my dream to have all the foods.
They're right here.
So in earlier conversations when we were chatting, you mentioned that cooking was a passion sport. First, why is it a passion sport? Second, who recruited you and got you hooked?
Oh gosh, why is it a passion sport? I mean, it's something that you kind of have to do if you have that fire in your belly for cooking. And so that's why I think it's a passion, and it can be dangerous in there. So yeah, I think it's a sport. You gotta practice, you gotta train to be good at this sport. So yeah, I think it's kind of a sport to me. And who influenced me? That was the second part of the question. So I have fierce, passionate women who cook in my family. So my grandma definitely grew up at her knee watching her in the kitchen, and my mom, and then my great aunt and uncle owned a bakery, and I got to be the taste tester official. So definitely grew up with a lot of great home cooking, and that definitely inspired me. I wanted to be around it all the time.
Taste tester is definitely like my dream job / dream retirement job, dream life goal.
It is pretty nice.
So you run a nonprofit called Food Literacy Center. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into, what you and your organization do. But before we do that, can you just explain, what does food literacy mean?
Sure. I define food literacy as understanding the impact of your food choices on health, environment, and economy. And I think it's important to note that those impacts are not equitably experienced, right? They're certainly, for example, the work that Food Literacy Center does when we think about just food access and the impact of our food on our health. And we look at the students that we're serving, because we're trying to reach the students who are at the highest risk for diet-related disease. And so we're going into Title I schools, which means that the school's serving largely low-income population. And so where are those schools? They're typically in Black and brown neighborhoods, right? And so the impacts of food on our health they're not being felt the same around even one city. They're definitely zip code specific oftentimes. So, in the same zip code as we have these Title I schools, you'll find a lack of sidewalks, a lack of safe places to play. You'll find poverty, a lack of good jobs. A lack of good grocery stores, they're food deserts. So you compound all of these factors, and they're all wrapped up in something as simple as kale or a carrot.
Yeah. And you had mentioned that like food is a tangible space, right? Where you're really driven to make the world better. Why is that? Why the change? Why food?
Yeah. So I've only ever worked in the nonprofit sector. And prior to starting Food Literacy Center, I had worked for several social service nonprofits. And, for those of us who, I truly believe that we can solve hunger, right? I truly believe that we can solve a lot of these public health issues that we have if we all set our minds to it and we all get together and do it collectively, right? And so I think it's really important to essentially believe in this path and then get together and work on this path. And in social services, a lot of times you might see individual people fall backwards, right? It's very difficult, particularly with adults, to see change happen. And so once I started thinking about the food space and how we can solve some of these social issues through food, for me, it's like a way every day that we can see little incremental change in our lifetime. Like, we can go into a school and have a kid who will say, I don't like that. I don't want to eat that. And within 6 weeks, they're chomping everything we put in front of them, beets, cactus, you name it, right? So to me, it's a joyful space. It also is a space where people are willing to talk because they don't know all these sort of social issues that are wrapped up behind the carrot and the kale. And so they get excited because there is this joy to it. So it's like a joyful gateway to some really hard issues that we need more people around. And there's food has this uniting factor to it that when people can work toward a solution with food, for some reason, you get, in my opinion, you get more people and more enthusiasm. So I don't know if that's the best answer. It's not a simple answer, but it's kind of what draws me to it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely not a simple answer, but you're right. I think food is very much a unifying area, right? And I think what you said is we can actually see a lot of change happen in this lifetime, right? We need the right people. We need more people to do the good work. And we can actually see those changes happen. Whereas some other very large things, to get them to change, like we might not see them in our lifetime, but this is something that we can solve together.
Absolutely.
I love it.
And we can set these kids up, right? We can set these kids up for a whole new generation of success. So really important that we reach these kids while they're young.
Absolutely. Okay. I'm super eager for everyone to learn a little bit more about your work and your programs offered through Food Literacy Center. But first, we have some statistics we're going to put up on the screen. It says only 25% of American children eat enough fruits and vegetables. Only 4% eat their recommended serving of daily vegetables. Like, expand on that. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So, and these statistics have not changed much in the decade that I have been working at Food Literacy Center, which is the scary part. And there's lots of statistics showing that knowledge has changed. Like, everybody knows they should eat a fruit or vegetable. But attitude and behavior are what have not changed. And so when you're looking at this data, it really relatively has been unchanged. So only about 1 in 4 kids and 1 in 4 Americans is eating fruits or vegetables at all. You take away the fruits, and only 4% of kids are protecting their health by eating their vegetables. So we have a big uphill battle in America because we have 2 generations of Americans that actually don't know how to cook. And when I talk about cooking, so you kind of have to go back to our grandmas to learn how to cook from scratch, right? And so we do have people who know how to warm up soups and spaghetti sauces. Like, I don't know about you guys, but I remember at the start of the pandemic going to stock up on supplies, and I found it easy in the very beginning because all the frozen vegetables were there. The produce aisle was still full, but what was gone was like all the noodles were gone. All the soups were gone, right? So it's these convenience products that we warm up and we believe we are cooking because of manufactured and processed foods. That is now the way we eat. And that's not just unique to America. This is stretching across the globe. And so this is affecting our diets. 50% of Americans are now sick because of their diets. So cooking could not be a more important solution to the problems that we're facing. And think about the billions of dollars that we pump into healthcare in this country. And it's really interesting watching COVID play out, because what I'm talking about here is public health, right? Eating your vegetables before we encounter these diet-related diseases like diabetes, like obesity, is prevention. And for Americans, we tend to use our health and our health system to undo a thing once it's already broken, rather than putting our dollars on the front end and preventing the problem from ever happening in the first place. And COVID is the first time in a very long time that collectively we've been asked to do a thing so that something doesn't happen, right? we want to eat our vegetables so that we don't get sick. We want to stay home so that we don't spread COVID. And how do you measure that, right? So how do you measure what doesn't happen? It's very difficult to see and understand for many people. And so that's why this work is so incredibly difficult, because you have to get that buy-in at the front end before these things take place. And so, yeah, so cooking is actually one of the best solutions to this problem. And, you know, we've got beautiful food growing all around us if only we knew what to do with it.
Yeah, so take us on a little virtual tour. I've got some photos here that I'm going to show. Take us on a tour. Tell us a little bit about the programs offered through Food Literacy Center.
Sure. So in the pre-COVID times, we would go into Title I schools, in elementary schools specifically, and we would teach hands-on cooking and nutrition classes. So we did this by running something called a Food Literacy Academy, where we train and certify food geniuses to be our instructors. And so they learn about not only how we present our curriculum and our philosophy, but they also learn about our food system, about these barriers that our specific children face, because our children are also food and nutrition insecure. So, and here you have a group of moms being trained as food geniuses, and then on the other side you have one of the kids in our program. And so we leverage the power of community members to reach more and more children. So these community members go into the classroom as our instructors, and then that's how we scale and reach more kids. So we do these hands-on cooking and nutrition programs, and during COVID times, we have done a combination of things. We've done virtual programming. We put all of our curriculum free and available online so that folks can access it. And then we also are sending home recipe kits. So a STEM-based recipe kit where they get all the fresh ingredients to make a meal for a family of 4. They get printed lesson materials, activities, coloring sheets, crayons, and we send those home with families so that we can help them continue to practice healthy food literacy while they're at home and cook together, because we know that people are cooking at home more, even though we are seeing a lot of convenience foods being cooked at home. So we're trying to get those healthy, fresh fruits and veggies home to make things like rainbow soup that's packed with all kinds of vegetables and rice. We make broccoli potato tacos, all kinds of really delicious stuff.
So I see these photos where, you know, there's a girl biting into a cactus, right? And she looks like she's loving it. Is that the initial reaction that the children first have when you put these? No. What's that like?
So we have to try real hard. Actually, I will say though that inspiring kids to eat their vegetables is the easiest part of my job. I thought it would be the hardest, and it's actually the easiest. Kids are adventurous, right? They're curious, and they take a lot of strong cues from how we respond to things. So we've created, over the decade that we've been in existence, something called broccoli boundaries and radish routines. So again, going back to that sort of public health perspective, knowledge is like step number 1. That's the easiest. But what we want to get to is kids eating those vegetables. That's behavior change. But standing in the way of the knowledge and the behavior is this tricky little thing called attitude. So we've got to change attitudes before we can get to the eating. So we've created these broccoli boundaries and radish routines, and they're essentially, the broccoli boundaries are a set of rules where we're creating an environment in which our kids can be successful with healthy eating. And then the radish routines are these repetitive practices that we get our kids to essentially repeat again and again until they've created a habit. So an example of a broccoli boundary would be, don't yuck my yum. And so don't yuck my yum is actually a rule one of our kids came up with, a broccoli boundary, where we basically a lot of kids' first reaction to a new fruit or vegetable is say, ew, gross, like I don't like that. And so we have this boundary of don't yuck my yum, because something that you might not like might be your neighbor's very favorite thing, and we don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. And this is such an attitude shifter for our kids, because suddenly they go, wait, somebody else likes this a lot? And well, if they like it and I like them, maybe I might like it. And so it quickly shifts their attitude from being one of, I don't want anything new, don't put it in front of me, to curiosity. And really quickly after that, we start to see kids become what we call food adventurers, willing to taste and try just about anything. That cactus, beets, you name it, we can get them to try it, which is pretty cool.
I was very much not a food adventurer in my childhood. So I'm curious, right? Like, why did you choose kids specifically? And it looks like Larry is sort of also asking, like, is there a clear reason, that kids aren't eating the right amount of veggies?
I think overall, the clear reason is that the junk food companies are winning, right? And there's this great new book out by Michael Moss called Hooked. And I mean, he actually went and talked to people at like Philip Morris, who they discovered that they could get people hooked on food in the same manner that they did tobacco. And they went with that, right? And we are now all the product of that. I mean, that's one piece of the puzzle. But it's, yeah, we're embedded in it, right? And I think the pandemic has doubled down and shown how much we are reliant on this stuff. You're hearing that restaurants can't hire right now because the fast food industry is booming and they can increase their prices, and so people can't afford to work for the mom and pop shop. I mean, there's just we're seeing a lot about our food system through this crisis. But why kids? So if, again, going back to that behavior change model, if what we're wanting is to change behavior to create that eating, we've got to look at what are the successful behavior change campaigns that we've seen throughout history. And a couple of the two that have been very successful are seatbelts and anti-tobacco. And if you remember back to your own childhood, they didn't target the adults that were smoking and driving. They were targeting us kids. And why do we do that? Because kids don't have habits yet. It's very, very difficult. If anybody who's tried to stop smoking or quit eating a thing, it's very, very difficult to undo a bad habit. Really easy to create a healthy new habit in itty bitties, right? That's also why junk food companies target our kids. They want to get those habits built in at a very early age. Well, we're going to steal a page from the junk food company's playbook, and we're going to do the same thing, only we're going to do it for fruits and vegetables, healthy. So we want to get to kids at the earliest age possible. There's even studies showing that when children are in the womb, babies, before they've been born, what the mom eats will influence what a kid is willing to eat later. So you can even start developing your child's palate that early, right? So the youngest kids possible is who we want to target, because then they will be able to develop these healthy habits and they will stick with them for life. There's all kinds of studies showing that. So that's why kids. Yeah.
Wow. I know that, in my job, I teach Google employees, right? Adults, perhaps maybe part of the two generations that don't know how to cook. I try to teach them, how to cook and set them up for success. But it's so often that I think myself and our fellow food service operators who are viewing right now, we get asked all the time. Parents are so distressed. They're like, how do I get my kids to eat their vegetables? Like you said, they know that they should be eating fruits and veggies, but they haven't been able to kind of break through to them, right? So what are some strategies that you would recommend? I know you mentioned don't yuck my yum. Talk to us a little bit about the radish routines.
Yeah, so one of the radish routines to sort of complement don't yuck my yum would be to, what we do in our program is we introduce our kids to a new fruit or vegetable every single time we have our program. And what I recommend for families is that you do this once a week. Because if you see folks fail pretty quickly when they go and they bring 5 experimental fruits and vegetables home, and then they get overwhelmed and then they eat 0 of them. So aim for 1 a week, because it's not overwhelming. You want to gradually ease into things. So bring your child, if you can, to the market and make it a game, and say, okay, we're going to pick out one new fruit or vegetable, and this week we're going to learn how to eat it. So sometimes you might just chop it up raw and dip it in some hummus. Other times you might actually want to learn how to roast it or put it into a taco, or, depending on your week, right? So you're just going to pick the one thing and make it your goal. And then it gets fun for kids, right? Like, it's something they're looking forward to. They're building this routine of, oh, every week I try a new fruit or vegetable. And our kids actually tell us one of their very favorite things about our program is that they get to try these vegetables on a regular basis. So yeah.
How exciting is that? And I think that you just armed us with so much knowledge that we can then share, with our own communities, whether it's at work or in our neighborhoods.
I mean, yeah, you guys could totally do a little tasting in the cafeterias too, right? Like, we're just tasting this broccolini this week, and if you love it, you're going to see it in a recipe too.
Yeah. Exactly. Okay. So still on this, right? We know that parents across demographics know that their kids are supposed to eat veggies, right? The highest areas, though, of diet-related diseases also correlated with hunger. Can you explain why that might be?
Why diet-related disease is tied to hunger?
Mm-hmm.
So all kinds of reasons: food deserts, lack of access, lack of transportation is a huge one. Being able to get, if you've got to take 2 buses and, a subway to get to a proper grocery store, then you're only going to be able to carry home what you can carry physically, right? Like, not having a car is a huge barrier. So there's all kinds of social barriers, right? That are tied to poverty, quite frankly. The number one cause of hunger is poverty. It's not a lack of food. We have enough food out there. It's that we don't have good jobs and good paying jobs. So why these kids specifically have both hunger and diet related diseases, because then you're not going to be hauling back cabbages, and you're like, those ramen noodles sure look good. They're light, they're quick. My kid can, Feliciana, who you showed holding the carrots, she told me when she was in 2nd grade that her mom worked graveyard shift, so she was often responsible for making dinner for herself and her little brother. And I said, well, what do you make? She said, we eat a lot of top ramen. I said, are you allowed to boil water when your mom's not home? And she said, oh, we eat it dry with the flavor packet sprinkled on top. Right. So these options become practical for a lot of reasons. Right. And so those options also may have a lot of calories, but they won't have much nutrition. Right. And so that's why food insecurity and nutrition insecurity go hand in hand. And so that's where we see these diet-related diseases start to tick up, is that families are bringing home, if you're on food stamps, you aren't going to risk buying calories that are experimental, like bringing home 3 different vegetables to taste. You are going to bring home the stuff you 100% know is going to get eaten. And a lot of times that is convenience foods, because you don't have dollars to spare. And so you see this pumping into Black and brown communities, quite frankly, these very calorie dense foods that have very little nutrition. And so that's why all of these go hand in hand. It used to be that you would see hunger in, say, developing country, and that would be tied to starvation, right? And in America, we see hunger and it's tied to obesity. It's very different playing field here. Our kids are up against a lot. Wow.
I know that I, for one, really would like to help shift that. I think that my colleagues who are viewing this as well would love to know, like, what can we do? Like, how can we help and assist your efforts? How can we change this?
I mean, number one way, donate and volunteer, right? Those are pretty big ones. But I think also being at Google and many of you guys are probably managers, you probably hire. We gotta address that poverty piece, right? So really thinking about your hiring practices and really thinking about where you are hiring from. Can you offer mentorship opportunities, internship opportunities, paid internships to kids from these communities? Because a lot of times our students will tell us they see culinary careers as a viable pathway for them because they may not be able to afford to go to college, but they know that culinary careers may not require that. You can get more on the job training in a culinary career than you can in some others. So they actually oftentimes aspire to getting jobs in restaurants, and but they do know that they need some kind of leg up to get their foot in the door. And so I think that's one way that you could really help. And then also, like we did a teen cooking training during the pandemic, and a lot of them personally want to eat healthier, but don't know how, because in a wealthier family, you might be able to have your kids attend a cooking class with a private chef or at the co-op, but our families cannot afford that. And so they're looking to programs like ours for just a little bit of culinary training. Like these sweet kids would say, I just want to be able to cook dinner so when my mom comes home from work, I've got a healthy meal for her. And they're looking for this. They want that. They're hungry for it. And they don't necessarily know where to find it. So I think there's so many ways that folks can help, talent, treasure, and time. Donating any and all of those things really helps.
Yeah. And I think this goes back to what you said at the beginning, Amber, about how like food is a passion sport, right? And I love that all you need is that passion. And you're absolutely correct. In the food service industry, on the job training, learning by doing, we all know that, yes, I can go to culinary school and I can learn a lot, but that on the job training really is going to be the thing that sets me up to be super, super successful in my career endeavors.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And another thing I think is important in the mix of all this too, I think helping create dignity, helping create empowerment, helping create voice, helping people feel seen and heard, standing up with Black Lives Matter, speaking out against the rates of Asian hate crimes that are on the rise right now. Silence on these issues speaks volumes to communities that are being hit with far too many of these issues simultaneously. And simply speaking out and saying you stand in support also helps these kids feel seen, helps them feel brave, gives them hope that maybe I could call and ask for an internship there. Maybe they do see me. Maybe they will offer a supportive place for me. So thinking about those kinds of things.
I think it's so often that as chefs or folks who work in the food industry, we didn't join this for recognition or praise. Like we joined this industry because we have passion, because we love food, because we love helping others. But I gotta say, like sometimes there's hard days where at the end, you're kind of like, my job is cook food, right? But I just want to remind everyone, it's so much more than that, right? As Amber mentioned, pregnant mothers, based on the diet that they eat, it could potentially determine the palate of their future child. Like we do that. How cool is that, right? We're really able to show and demonstrate through our food that good food, it doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be complicated, right? We're able to showcase the amazing flavor, the seasons, things that are local, and give parents who might be part of the two generations that don't know how to cook, give them inspiration for different ways that they can cook for their kids at home. So for all of our viewers, like you play such a huge role in this. And really, I'm giving you that recognition now that you didn't necessarily ask for. So thank you for that. Amber, we had a couple questions. Helene is saying, what is the older version of Don't Yuck My Yum? How do we create adventure in food at work? So it's so often that we have folks come into our cafes and say, I really want bacon, 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 and more bacon. What's up with all the kale, right? How can we start to shift that?
Yeah, it's hard, right? I think again, it's the most important part of this is you're not taking away, right? And so if somebody thought that eating kale meant they couldn't have bacon, they will not even consider the kale, right? And so what we do at Food Literacy Center is our very first recipe we make with our kids is a peanut butter sandwich. And we swap out the jelly for fresh fruit slices. And we tell the kids, we want you to eat a fruit or vegetable with every snack or meal. And we're going to make a recipe that we know you like. We know every kid loves a peanut butter sandwich and that they can't fail when they cook it, right? So it's super simple. And we then take them on this gentle journey with the main recipes that we're cooking. We take them on a gentle journey of swapping out things in the foods they already are familiar with. And so we're not taking away their burritos or their pizza. We're putting vegetables on them. And I think this is really important. And then at the end, we have a brown rice and kale salad. But by then, they're ready for it and they're excited about it. But if we started with that, no one would sign up for our program, right? Because they haven't developed the palate, and it's an education, right? It's a journey. And so I think it is similar with adults, right? That produce of the day where we're being food adventurers and we're trying one new thing. That is I'm going to shake myself up out of my comfort zone, but the foods I'm eating, the recipes I'm learning, that is a gentle journey, because food is memory, food is feeling, food is emotion. And we have to approach it as, I'm adding this joy, this flavor, this crunch, this color. I'm adding that to your day today, rather than like, I'm taking your bacon away, right? And so with that approach, adults are definitely more willing to come along. So you and I had talked about one time, mac and cheese being very popular. What if there was a cool sauteed veggie topping that was optional? Like, hey, we have this amazing farmer. He's got this great XYZ, pepper that you can't find anywhere. And we've turned it into this amazing pickled pepper sauce. It's killer on mac and cheese. Do you want to try some? Right? And we take by baby steps, like we're going to sneak those vegetables into this amazing sauce, but not sneaking, right? This is another broccoli boundary. We don't want to hide things. We want to be super upfront. We are inviting you. We're showing you, this is the pepper. Here it is in the sauce. Do you want to taste it? Everything is your choice. Everything is transparent. And with that enthusiasm and joy, they're kind of like, I'd kind of be a sucker not to taste that. It sounds amazing, right? And so that's kind of how you do this with adults, if that's helpful.
So to clarify, do you say, taste this with the pepper on it because it's like just out of this world delicious? Or do you say it's out of this world delicious and it's better for you because there's a vegetable? Or do you hide that? Not hide
Always with flavor. Always lead with flavor and joy. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And everyone knows they need to eat vegetables, right? They just don't know how, and they don't want it to not be fun. So when we put the fun in it for them and make it so easy, that's what the convenience foods companies are doing. They're making it so easy for you to not eat a vegetable. We're going to make it real easy for you to eat a vegetable. And then you're going to go back to your office and be like, I ate peppers today. Like, you're going to feel awesome about yourself, right? I ate my vegetables. So. Yeah.
And I had mac and cheese and it was all delicious. So it's a win-win-win. It's a win-win-win for sure. And I think you're right. We've seen very similar things. Like when we lead with food, when we lead with flavor, everyone is so responsive to it, and our excitement is contagious, right? And so everyone sees how excited we are about these ingredients and how excited we are to work with these delicious fresh foods and flavors, and so they get excited too.
Totally.
So Larry is asking, do you take the kids to the farm where they can see the food growing in this farm to fork capital?
So we're doing one better. I convinced our school district to build on a 2.5 acre vacant plot across from public housing at one of our elementary schools to build us a cooking school and a farm. So we are going to be moving into that in fall. So then the kids can come to our farm. But field trips for low income elementary schools are definitely a big expense and a rarity. So you don't see a lot of that. Oftentimes you've got to bring the farm to the school. You've got to put those school garden beds in and that kind of thing. And I will say, between cooking and gardening, I will take cooking any day, because for one, I'm impatient. But when we're talking about that behavior change, I want it to happen. I want 6 weeks to kale. Right? I want to take that kid from not eating the vegetable to eating the vegetable, and I want it to happen fast, right? Watching the garden grow is certainly an avenue. But in a 45-minute class, I can take a raw eggplant to a meal, right? And get it in the kid's mouth. So that taste education is probably the most important thing we can do for our kids to get them to the behavior change we're looking for. But certainly school gardens and understanding all of that is really critical.
Okay, so you just said you convinced the district, right, to build you a cooking school and a garden. Let's give Amber a round of applause for that, because that's incredible. And you're right, it's going to have a profound impact, especially if these students didn't have the opportunity to travel to these farms, right? If there's no sidewalks in the community, there's no field trip to a farm. Right? Absolutely. And you brought the farm to them. So Amber, incredible, amazing job. All right. So next question, I'm very curious. Was there a pivotal moment where you were like, all right, I'm doing my own thing now. I am starting my own business. What was that moment?
Yeah, it was the last recession. And a lot of factors were happening at once. I think it's so interesting that this pandemic is shaking up a lot of the issues with our food system that people are starting to recognize and understand there's a problem and want to fix. Same thing was happening coming out of the last recession. It just brought a lot of hunger. Increased in the last recession. It's increased again in this recession. I saw a lot of other fellow food movement, other nonprofits start that were addressing other areas of our food system. All of us sort of started around the same time. It was just this big awakening and a big awareness. We had the return of the victory gardens, right? Like that, it was just such and for me personally, in the nonprofit sector, we got kicked around, right? Jobs in the nonprofit sector came and went. So I was unemployed, and I was like, how am I gonna, you think about what are you going to do for fun, right? Or what are your, vacations are gone, happy hours with your friends are gone. Like where, what kind of things can you do for fun, and what's going to be the joy, right? Because the world around you suddenly is stripped of joy. And I realized, I was like, I know how to cook. My adventures are going to be the farmer's market every single week. It's colorful. It's beautiful. There's friends there that I can see and say hi to. For $5, I can fill an entire bag of awesome things that I can go home and make new and different meals. Like, talk about endless amounts of joy. So for me, I really dug into that, simultaneously watching the world around me change and wanting to do something about it. So I was like, okay, I know how to cook pretty okay. I'm a home cook. I'm not a chef. I think there are some solutions to what's going on that's broken right now through cooking. So I started interviewing my fellow nonprofits, and I was like, where is the place for cooking here? And that's when I began to understand how needed this literacy education and basic culinary training is for kids. And also part of that equation is that because we do live here in Sacramento, the farm to fork capital to America, in our food banks, we're flush with all this gorgeous produce. I mean, some of it's just being gleaned from backyard trees. And the food banks said, folks are taking this home and they don't know what to do with it. Or they won't take it because they don't know what to. And I saw this. I was working in a nonprofit that helped homeless women get jobs and homes. And there was a soup kitchen. And people would donate from their victory gardens, these bags of, eggplants and tomatoes and stuff. And you'd find them on the sidewalk, because what are you going to do with a raw eggplant and a zucchini if you don't know how to cook, right? Or in this case, you don't have a kitchen, right? So I realized this was a gap that we could fill by helping folks understand, here's how you get this from the food bank into your home, and like look at what quality it is, and now let's show you what to do with it. So like it's interesting watching our social media feed when we're cooking something with, say, pomegranates, and people are like, how do you expect these kids to afford these pomegranates? We're like, we're in Sacramento, they're at our food bank. So it's pretty interesting opportunity. So yeah, that's kind of how Food Literacy Center came together. Long story, but
And business-wise, did you already know how to run a business? Like, how did you learn how to do this?
I knew enough things about parts of nonprofit. I knew how to cook. I would also say that I knew I'm good at knowing what I don't know. And so I was able to, I just basically phoned a friend, right? Like all the people that I knew that had skill sets that I don't, there were friends of mine that knew more about education than me, friends who knew more about nutrition than me, people who knew more about how to navigate a school district than me. I was pretty confident that I knew how to write grants. I knew some of the big foundations in town because I had worked in nonprofit and had those relationships. So I was confident I could get us funded. And I was confident in my creativity and my program development skills, having worked in nonprofit for so long. But those other areas of expertise is where I definitely leaned on other people, and just sort of, and sometimes, I interviewed recently on Raising Kale, a seed breeder, and he was telling me that he works with Dan Barber for Row 7 Seeds. And he was saying that he wasn't trained as a seed breeder. And that actually has been a benefit to him, right? Because he knew enough to get himself into good trouble. And if he had been formally trained, he was like, I wouldn't have even attempted some of the stuff that I did, because I would have been trained to know better than to do this wild thing, right? But in his mind, it wasn't a wild thing. It was just like, hey, let's follow that path and see. So I think in some ways I had this advantage of I know enough things over here, and maybe some of those things that I didn't know, in some ways probably ended, I didn't know any better than to ask a school district to build me a cooking school, right? It has been a bear of a task. Looking back, would I have, if I knew then what I know now, would I have even entered into that possibility? Maybe not, right? Because it's been a lot, but I didn't know better. So I think sometimes not knowing is an advantage.
I'm sure you know a lot more now, but I do hope that you're staying wild and kind of reaching for the sky there.
Definitely. When I hear myself say too, oh, we need to, only listen to the experts on that, I always go, wait, don't take a step back. Maybe some experts and some not experts. A good combination is healthy.
Exactly. Okay, so you mentioned COVID. Yeah. How has your business pivoted? You went from doing in-person cooking and nutrition classes. How have you shifted during COVID? You told me about at the beginning of the year, you always pick a word. So maybe that's a good place to start. And then you can tell us what's next.
Yeah. So at the beginning of the year, I always pick a theme word. And I picked excellence at the beginning of 2020 and quickly changed it to adaptability. We probably changed what we were doing in a major way almost monthly during the pandemic. So 3 days after schools closed, I had a meeting with my staff. I was like, okay, we're literally everything we do is hands-on with kids in a classroom. So I was like, if we don't solve this, do we exist anymore? That's what's going through my mind. And so I had my staff, I was like, let's create a list of like, what are the things we know are broken in this pandemic? And what are the skill sets we have to be able to create some kind of solution? So we decided we would make our curriculum virtual because we knew everybody was going to be homeschooling. We also knew everybody was cooking because they had stocked up on all these pantry staples and stripped the grocery store shelves. So we went virtual with all of our lessons, and then quickly learned that most of our students did not have computers or internet. And so then I called our school lunch team, and we have an awesome partnership with them. And they were like, come out and, do some kind of food distribution alongside school lunch. So we shifted to putting those pieces of curriculum and printing them and then putting them into these recipe kits to send home with the kids. And we've been doing that alongside school lunch throughout the pandemic because we have seen rates of hunger. They are the highest in America than they have ever been since rates of hunger have been recorded since the 1960s. And about a third of those who are experiencing hunger are children. And so the lines of cars that we see showing up for that school meal and showing up for these recipe kits is pretty unreal. And we know that we have been set back about 30 years in terms of the progress that had been made. And again, this is all so linked to poverty, right? We cannot pass food out to solutions, right? Like that is not a solution, that's a Band-Aid. So we've got to be able to start thinking about the resilience side of these solutions, because we're looking at a decade of work just to get on top of the hunger needs. And that's not addressing some of these other equality and financial barriers that our families are up against. So it's been a year. But our families have been very excited to have the fresh food. Our kids are like, we have gotten them hooked on vegetables. So they actually ask us, the families will come and like ask the school principal, hey, when is food literacy bringing back those broccoli potato tacos? So they get really excited for this stuff. Yeah.
So it sounds like we still have a lot of work to do. Right. But I also want to celebrate just the incredible work that you have done to date. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how many kids you've worked with?
Yeah. So this is a statistic of since we started Food Literacy Center, we celebrate 10 years this July. And and that number is definitely well over 9,000 now. Just these numbers were, I think, in December. So that's how much we have, and we provide our programs for free because we know the school districts can't afford them, and we don't want any barrier to getting this type of program to our kids. Wow. Another busy bee thing that we did during the pandemic was my team and I wrote a book. So that's been super fun. And this was another piece of knowing and seeing and understanding what was happening across America, knowing that people were craving more resources for home education for their kids. And then also just knowing that we want to get food literacy and spread it far and wide. So we created a little science book. It's a food science book, and it talks about the history of food. And you go into your kitchen and do little science experiments to find out about osmosis. We make salt-cured eggs. We learn about endothermic chemical reactions by making Italian gelato in a plastic bag. So it's a lot of fun and gets kids in the kitchen.
My heart just exploded. I told you my background is in food science originally. And so like to see like the future children reading these awesome food science books and like going into the kitchen and learning the science behind making gelato. Like I need to buy a copy of this book, and I'm an adult. Is that okay?
Oh, totally. Yeah. In fact, I read some to my husband and he was learning things. I've actually heard from a lot of adults that like their kids are like reading statistics to them and they're like, I didn't know that. So yeah, adults are enjoying it too, actually.
And then Amber, just briefly, we were sort of talking about, like what resources there are out there, like different books and things like that. And we just posted your book list recommendations, but can you just briefly take us through maybe a couple of those? Oh, a couple.
I have a lot of books that I would recommend. That's a few, but they are listed in all those. I would say, the first one that I read was Jane Goodall's Harvest for Hope. That's when everybody else was reading Michael Pollan's Omnivore's Dilemma. This is her version of that book, and I'm a big Jane Goodall fan. It just sort of walks you through all the whys. Like, how are we connected? How are our food choices connected to the planet? How is that connected to our health? Again, that none of this stuff can be separated one from the other. And so that for me, and she also tends to look at the world through this lens of joy and hope. So I really enjoyed reading that one. And then, Tomato Land by Barry Estabrook. He actually has a new book out called Just Eat, where he has gone on all kinds of diets to kind of show how diets don't work, right? It's about lifestyle, but Tomato Land, they actually turned this one into a documentary. It's about the tomato, those orange tomatoes that go into things like your tacos at Taco Bell and the grocery stores. The large majority of those are grown in Florida, and he walks you through how those get from farm to Taco Bell, for example, and he talks in great detail about how the treatment of farm workers is wrapped up in those cheap tacos. So it's a really good, eye-opening book. Like I said, they did turn it into a documentary as well, but there's so many good ones.
Amazing. I definitely want to check out Tomato Land. That one definitely sparked my interest, and I need to check that out. We're coming up on our last couple of minutes. I do see that we have another question in our chat box. Before we get to those questions, though, how do we stay in touch with you? How can we find you?
Any of the social medias. I am at Chief Food Genius on Instagram. You can also follow Food Literacy Center there. You can also follow my podcast, Raising Kale, on Instagram. It's Raising Kale Podcast. And I hope you'll listen to the podcast. I interview kale raisers around the world that are getting into good trouble and using food as a tool. So I've interviewed Alice Waters, this guy Michael that I was telling you about, the seed breeder with Dan Barber's company, Row 7 Seeds. I've interviewed lots of fun, amazing people who are making a difference, and they give you advice too about how you can make the world a better place through.
Incredible. Larry's asking, are you only in Sacramento? Can we get involved in your program locally?
That's a dream of mine. I would love to be able to expand, and I think that is the next phase of Food Literacy Center. But right now we are still pretty small. We're just 6 staff members, and we are pretty local. But once we are moved into our new cooking school, that Food Literacy Academy where we train our food geniuses, like I mentioned, I want to be able to open that up, because now we'll have a facility where people could come and train with us in Sacramento, and then take those resources and those programs back to their own community. So those are our near-term dreams that I have for the nonprofit, for sure. And I am certainly always open to hitting the road myself and coming out to visit with folks, learn more about what you've got going on in your community. We do have some free resources. All of our recipes, our curriculum are all super available and free to download online. So always happy to talk about ways that we might partner.
Amazing. I look forward to our future cooking class together. It looks like we have one more question. We have time for one more question. Beth is asking, how do you market to those young parents who are looking to have a better understanding of how to cook healthy meals for their families?
How do we find the parents, or are you more
how do you market to the young parents? So like, I guess, maybe like, how do you teach them, or like, how do you find them and encourage them to cook better?
So you can find all of our broccoli boundaries and radish routines on our website at foodliteracycenter.org. So I definitely encourage you to download those. And how we find the parents. So we try to, again, go through the kid, kind of like the pester power that was used in the anti-tobacco and the, sorry, my cat is doing this on the window. I don't know if you can hear that. So we try to use the pester power of the kids to go home and say, you know, put on your seatbelt, or in this case, cook me broccoli. And so we send our recipes home with the kids. And we also actually have a lesson that we do with them about how to advocate for and ask adults for vegetables. So we prefer it to come from the kids, right? So that they feel empowered, that they have a voice and a choice in their health. But we do definitely hear from all the parents that they'll come back and say, oh, my kid came home with whatever spaghetti recipe or this soup recipe, and we made that and it's so good, and now we make it once a week. So we definitely hear feedback like that quite often. And then once a week, we do a Facebook Live recipe video where we cook one of our recipes, and we try to reach more people that way. And then they're also on YouTube. And all of our recipes are like super, super simple, budget friendly stuff that we think that families and kids can succeed at making together.
Yeah, simplicity is always key, right? Like you said, like leading with flavor, leading with food, simplicity, all keys to success. Well, Amber, it looks like we're at time. There might be a ton more questions out there. So if you have more questions for Amber and you didn't have an opportunity to ask them now, reach out to her, stay connected with her at her social media handles. Amber, I want to sincerely thank you for sharing all of your knowledge with us today. This has just been so eye-opening, and I know that myself and my counterparts who are viewing just truly appreciate you. So thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was a lot of fun. Enjoyed the conversation.
Awesome. Well, great to see everyone. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next month for the next event in our brand new diversity series. Thank you again for joining. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.